This is Our News, the weekend edition. And on the broadcast tonight, a renewed commitment. The Prime Minister assures all unions that his government is committed to completing negotiations on all outstanding industrial agreements. Plus, as the doctors' strike continue, we find out the public's view on the matter. And the Christian Council renews its call for a sexual offenders registry.
Our News is brought to you by Alive.
Good evening, I'm Andrew Knowles, and thanks so much for joining us. Topping news tonight, the nation's chief prime minister, Dr. Hubert Minnis, says his government takes the union's concerns seriously. In fact, he reiterated his government's commitment to concluding negotiations over outstanding industrial agreements. The declaration comes following that high-level meeting between cabinet and public sector unions on Saturday. The Prime Minister called the meeting with the unions to discuss the country's economic and fiscal affairs.
What we wanted to do as a government is to give our realistic impressions of the economy and our limitations to the public sector unions, and we accomplished that. I think, and the Prime Minister has told me that he thinks that the meeting was very productive and very informative, and most of the union leaders seem to accept that in the meeting.
7 public sector unions participated in the meeting, where they got a very detailed presentation about the country's financial status by the Financial Secretary. This paved the way for discussions to move forward with a factual understanding of the country's economic outlook and the government's fiscal constraints.
The discussions were very frank. They were very frank in their positions, and to the extent that we could answer their questions, we did. I thought that going forward, the Prime Minister made a commitment that he'll have similar meetings such as this before the budget projections are formulated. And that is something that is new, and it's a commitment that he made.
The meeting follows a Bahamas Public Services Union-led march from Market Street to downtown Nassau, where hundreds of disgruntled government workers protested outside Cabinet Office last week. The BPSU is pushing for a $1,200 lump sum payment for its members ahead of the start of the new school year.
All of the major unions made representation with respect to their economic demands, and the Financial Secretary and the Deputy Prime Minister responded to those questions.
In a press statement following that meeting, the Prime Minister noted that government recognizes that finalizing all outstanding industrial agreements with the relevant unions is a pressing concern, and those negotiations must be concluded. The government stressed to the unions the importance of achieving fiscal sustainability to enhance the social and economic benefits that can be maintained over the medium and long term. He also underscored the importance of the Bahamas returning to a more sustainable fiscal path. Dr. Minnis concluded that the economy is experiencing early stages of recovery, and at all times, government must make decisions that are in the best interest of all Bahamians. Meanwhile, doctors remain on strike after talks with the Public Hospitals Authority and the Labor Director failed on Friday. Members of the public are divided on whether they support the Bahamas Doctors Union strike action. As a junior doctor strike looks set to continue this week, Our News took to the streets to get public feedback on the doctors' strike action.
I mean, basically, anyone should be able to strike, to tell you the truth. I don't think taking it out on the patients is a good idea.
The junior physician's main issue is a holiday back pay bill of nearly $5 million. The group obtained its strike certificate nearly 8 months ago. Many members of the public are deeply divided on the doctors' action. On one hand, many sympathize with doctors and say they deserve their pay. On the other, some insist that it is difficult to ignore the patients who are impacted by reduced levels of care.
I think everyone has their rights. If you're paying the people what you want the people to do.
The protest is necessary, but find another way to do it so that the patients and then the Bahamian populace doesn't isn't hit from it.
Yeah, but they're human beings. They need to get paid properly. They need to work in good conditions. So if they have to go on strike in order to get that, then they go on strike.
On Friday, the BDU accused the PHA and health minister of ambushing union leaders by showing up to a meeting scheduled with acting labor director John Pinder. A meeting between PHA officials and the BDU is expected on Monday. In the meantime, care at PMH and other public facilities have been reduced to emergency services only. Well, following a frank discussion between senior government officials and union leaders, the labor minister was asked if the doctors' union indicated if it intended to end its strike, which began on Wednesday.
I do not want to discuss the question of the state of any current industrial unrest. If the respective leaders of the union want to, that is their purview. But as Minister of Labor, I want to stay in the middle of the discussions.
Turning to news from the crime beat tonight, another man is dead after being shot, this time on the island of Eleuthera. Police say 3 men were sitting outside a residence in the settlement of James Cistern around 9 last night. The trio was approached by a gunman who opened fire on them before running away. One of the men was hit. We're told the island's doctor was called to the scene, where he pronounced the injured man dead. No one else was injured during the incident. This is the second fatal shooting in less than 24 hours after a man was shot and killed in a home in Marsh Harbor, Abaco yesterday. Police investigations continue. Well, the Bahamas Christian Council and the family of Marco Archer are renewing calls for the establishment of a sexual offenders registry. The introduction of the registry continues to be delayed despite repeated promises from government officials. Our Jasmine Brown has more.
For years, successive governments have talked about implementing a sexual offenders registry, but that is yet to happen. The idea for a sex offender registry came about after the 2011 murder of 11-year-old Marco Archer. Kofi Goodman was convicted of the crime. Marco's family recently told the press that in addition to the Marco's alert system, they would also like to see the establishment of a sex offenders registry.
One thing that I would think that is in the making now in terms of the predators list, the sex offenders list, something like that, because I think that it would help for us as parents and your loved ones to know who our kids are surrounded by, who is their neighbor, who's around the corner, who to, look out for. So I'm thinking that's the next step.
In late 2013, amendments to the Sexual Offences Act and the Child Protection Act were debated and passed. The bills were to provide for the creation of a sexual offenders register and a mandatory action rescuing children operation alert. The Marco alert system was implemented in July 2016. However, a sexual offenders register has not been introduced to date. The amendments state that an offender would be required to inform the relevant officials of every address or location at which he or she stays or intends to stay, change of address, or change of name. Bahamas Christian Council President Delton Fernander says the BCC fully supports a registry.
Well, the church has always been in support of the registry. We have also, as stakeholders, been collaborating with the state on what that will entail. I think that's where it's at. What are the criteria?
However, he says they need to be careful about how it is implemented.
We want to be as careful as possible because minors just turning adults could end up on the register, as is in other jurisdictions, doing the things that they think might be just casual fun or casual sex. And so we really, really have to, first of all, inform what gets you on the register, and then also be mindful that not everybody on the register are violent offenders.
National Security Minister Marvin Dame said several months ago that a sexual offenders register would be established by the end of the first quarter of 2019. However, there has been no movement on the matter. Reporting for our News, I'm Jasmine Brown.
All right, still to come on our News, an update on multi-million-dollar repairs at LPIA. Plus, we catch up with Songlan winner Tebi. That's coming up when our News, the Weekend Edition, returns.